Hello, subscribers. As you can probably tell, I've got a new voice synthesizer. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get a good version of my own voice to work with it. They always seem to have some issue, I assume with background noise. Regardless, it won't be the voice I use in my next response to another video by Mindshift.
Transformation Jutsu!
This one I had to do because it seems like it's going to be the same video Zod did a response to. And I want to see how Mindshift compares to Zod. Will he make the same mistakes, or will he be more charitable? Judging by the title and thumbnail, I predict he will make some very similar mistakes, but he won't nitpick as much since his video is shorter than Zod's. Without further ado, let's get on with the review. And during my 3 years or so of doubting and transitioning and trying to hold on to this and wanting this to be true despite what I was hearing and seeing, I got crickets back from God. The Christian excuses for this are reprehensible, telling me I didn't have enough faith, or I wasn't sincere enough, or I wasn't patient enough, or if I just prayed this kind of way. And I've explained all this before in my deconversion video, and go look at the comments. Christian after Christian after Christian, you were never really Christian, you never really believed, you didn't want God to be true, you wanted to be handed over to your sin, etc., etc., etc. It's disgusting. Okay, so first, I'm going to ignore the empty bluster against biblical creationism, or as he put it, anti-evolution, because that's not the point of the video. Although you probably didn't see that part in my video anyway. Second, he says it's disgusting that some people believe in once saved, always saved. And I don't have a firm position on that doctrine, but I do lean to the idea that, yes, you are not a Christian. You went through the motions, but you never actually believed any of it, or at least not the fundamentals. So what is disgusting about that? It is an interpretation of the facts as given, and it is not an interpretation of your honesty or character. Let me give a personal example that may help. When I was younger, I followed more Calvinistic teachings, but I didn't actually know what Calvinism taught, or even the term Calvinism really. But when I learned that Calvinism taught that we don't have free will, and that God controls our thoughts and actions, then I knew I wasn't a Calvinist. I already had non-Calvinist beliefs, I just didn't know it yet. Likewise, when you profess to be Christian, you already had atheistic beliefs, you just didn't discover what your real beliefs were yet. This, I believe, is why it's so rare for someone to deconvert from one belief only to return to that same belief later. Their initial deconversion isn't a new belief forming, it's their real belief being uncovered.
Know how much it strikes people's emotions. I look at the moral argument and I go, that one hits people's emotions and it's intellectually strong as well. So that's interesting. This kind of hits both.
So yeah, so far, absolutely no issues. I think he's right. I think that there are many different arguments for both God's existence and God's, he says, love. But however you define it, there are philosophical approaches, there are personal responses, there's kind of a third category, which is scriptural issues, right? Using the Bible to prove itself or disprove itself, and a whole host of other sub-genres. But yes, he's right. This is a more personal one, granted.
Here we go. I will just leave that there to showcase the difference between Mindshift and Zod. Mindshift is already way ahead of Zod here, so much more charitable and not trying to be antagonistic.
There's a few ways to poke holes in this argument, okay? Logically speaking, I think.
So he says there's a few ways to poke holes in this argument from a logical perspective. All I hear for the rest of the video, and tell me if I'm wrong here, is one way.
Yes, as Mike says with the very next words out of his mouth, he's only giving one answer.
There's a few ways to poke holes in this argument, okay? Logically speaking, I think. One is to challenge how much sincerity is really going on in this person.
This is not the video for a comprehensive answer to the problem.
I think there are some other good arguments about divine hiddenness. For instance, you could say God chooses to reveal himself at his own time to each individual, but that doesn't pair well with free will. So for example, let's say that God's going to reveal himself to me when I'm 40, and he's got big plans for me, right? He allowed me to go through this deconversion. He allowed me to go through all of these issues with my family and my friends, etc. He's allowed me to maybe pull other people away from the faith because his plan is greater. When he reconverts me at 40 by finally showing up in my life for the first time, think about the things I'll be able to do for the kingdom of God. This is one of the biggest arguments from believers, is this plan of God's timing. But it doesn't work with free will, because unless God is going to orchestrate my entire life in such a way that I get to stay alive until I'm 40, he's going to take away the free will from the drunk driver that might kill me at 38, or he took away my free will to not eat poorly that causes me to have a heart attack at 39, right? There's all these ways that I could die in a free will system before he would allow me to see him.
That's not how free will works, and we saw this in the last video of Mindshifts that I responded to. He doesn't understand free will. If I take your keys so you can't drive, then according to Mindshift, I have taken your free will. You no longer have free will because I have your keys. Do you see how utterly ridiculous that sounds? Free will is not the ability to do anything. It's the ability to make choices from a set of options. If one option is removed, it does not take free will with it. You would have to remove all options to even make that argument.
I'm not saying they're knowingly being deceitful about how sincere they are in their searching of God. There can be lots of things going on in the heart of a human.
I don't want to nitpick, but he's trying to give an out to not make this look so bad. Like, oh, they think they're sincere. Isn't that the definition of sincerity? I might be wrong about something, but if I'm not purposely trying to be wrong or misrepresented or do it with ulterior motives, etc., like I am 100% being sincere. You can sincerely do something wrong.
Even Mindshift's nitpicks are better than Zod's. I actually think that was a good point to bring up. I'm not saying I agree with it entirely, but there is some semantics that could be worked on here.
They say like, hey, I'm going to spend a little time like really praying, really going to church even, really maybe singing worship songs as a way of later being able to say, hey, I sought the Lord, I really tried, and that confirms my atheism one more time. Perhaps the agenda here was a way of proving themselves right about God all along.
Okay, so it wasn't sincere. Perhaps the agenda here was proving themselves right. That's not a correct motive to be sincere. Doing all these things so after the fact you can reconfirm your own belief and say, ha, I knew it, is not being sincere. I'll give him that. Are there atheists that do this? 100%. But I would not say that they are sincerely seeking God, and Mike is. He is strawmanning this argument in a very horrific way.
Wait, hold up.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
I had to read the transcript to get a grasp on what he just said. First, he agreed with Mike, then accused him of straw manning. He says that Mike would say they are sincerely seeking God. But wasn't the whole point that Mike was making that they weren't? Isn't that the whole problem you had with Mike in order to make this response? It's starting to smell like Mindshift doesn't want to agree with Mike too much. So he tried to organize his words in a way to accuse Mike of straw manning, even though it would literally be Mindshift doing the straw manning here.
The whole point here is, what about those of us, Christian or atheist, who are sincerely seeking God? You can't just give an example of someone being insincere and then say, see, what?
The whole point is that you cannot see into a person's heart. And you know what? After seeing this video already before, I mean Mike's video, not Mindshift, I find it suspicious that Mindshift would even make this point, because he already knows what Mike is going to say later. Mike will later say that maybe the hypothetical sincerely looking atheist may not exist, so Mike will have already answered Mindshift's complaint here.
This is entirely possible. This is how human psychology seems to work. What I'm suggesting is divine hiddenness requires a certain kind of person that may not exist.
Oh my gosh.
See, that actually came sooner than I thought. But what is with the false shock? You already admitted you saw the video before.
So just a sincere person does not exist? I don't think I'm reading this incorrectly. I'm not trying to misrepresent Mike. He's just clearly stated that due to our own human faults of psychology, we can't sincerely go after something and be wrong, which I would agree with. But then the example he used is someone who is being obviously corrupt and insincere, and getting the equation then that this divine hiddenness problem requires a person who just may not exist, a sincere non-believer or a sincere doubter. Those people just can't exist. Wrong.
That is not what Mike said. Mike said that a sincerely seeking non-believer may not exist, not a sincere unbeliever.
Against this is quite a number of people, and they give their testimony that they did seek the Lord and they did find him. They did cry out to God and he did answer. They did open the word of God. They did start praying. They did start attending church or something like this, and they started seeking the Lord, and then their lives were radically transformed. And every one of those testimonies would seem to be an argument against this divine hiddenness thing.
It's actually a bit offensive. Every atheist who says they're sincere isn't. They're just trying to prove their atheism, which doesn't make any sense. But now we're going to appeal to majority, which is an issue in and of itself. And which majority? All the believers who have sought God and found him. And every single one of those seems to disprove this other side.
Stop. You're beginning to make a habit out of straw manning Mike. Actually, going off your last video, you seem to really favor straw manning the other side. But Mike did not say those testimonies disprove divine hiddenness. He said they were all arguments against it. In other words, if I get one testimony of an atheist who says he sincerely looked and could not find, and that testimony is offered as evidence against God's existence, then any testimony of the kind Mike just mentioned exactly counters the atheist testimony, and that makes for a really bad argument against God's existence.
Why does God reveal himself to some people and not others? Right? Like a greater extrapolation of this is the example that I give that you guys are probably tired of me saying. God revealed himself to a chosen people group in the Middle East and then did not reveal himself to anyone on any other separated continent. This went on for a huge span of time. The problem of divine hiddenness is not that God just disappeared or has never been. It's that there are claims that he has been and that he has appeared. So why not to me? Or why not to everyone?
That is a much stronger version of the argument than what Mike was addressing. I am not going to answer it though, because one, that seems more like a question for God. And yes, I'm aware that may seem like a catch-22. And two, it requires a more comprehensive answer that I am not prepared for. But I do remember something I said in my video responding to Zod. God hides himself because those who reject him having knowledge of him have a greater condemnation than those who reject him out of ignorance. But I would not give that as the entire reason.
Side note, I would 100% blame God for a system that sets up that a sinful person cannot find God. And the Bible does say as much that our own sin can blind us or can keep God from connecting with us or can interfere with our prayers. There are all kinds of horrific, hypocritical statements throughout the Bible about when God retreats from us, and it's always at our own doing. But who needs God besides that sinner? And by the way, which stories do Christians love? The drug addict, the sex addict, the Satanist, etc. All these people deep in their sin that what? That God shows up to, that God reveals himself. They have this grand awakening. I mean, let's just look at Paul as the example for this. Paul is out killing Christians, and God shows up to him in the most divine way ever. Why wasn't Paul's sin keeping him from the blindness of God? So even if I give you that God is real and that God does, because of sin, sometimes separate himself from his creation, where's the consistency?
This whole tirade seems to go with what I just said. You do not see God because you would reject him anyway. God is doing you a favor by not showing himself to you, because it would only bring you greater condemnation. As for Paul, he was not an atheist, he was a Jew, so it's not really comparable.
So anyway, the whole point here is I think he's being extremely unfair. I think that he is talking about a subset group of individuals that are, it's the same individual, it's the same insincere person. I admit there are insincere atheists or whatever you want to call it. Of course there are. People are people. People do things for all kinds of different motivations. But some people do strive so sincerely to find this God. And some people get it and some people don't. What's up with that? That's the whole argument.
My thought is the hard part is that people then make it personal. Mike's not talking about this logical argument about God and his existence or whatever. Mike's talking about me. He's attacking me personally. He's by making the argument depend upon if I'm the atheist, depend upon my sincerity and my integrity. I then come into a currently in our culture, a very advantageous position for arguing where I get to say, anyone who disagrees with me on this hiddenness thing is attacking me personally. They're attacking my sincerity. They're attacking my integrity. They're attacking my story.
No, only if the person trying to answer the question of the divine hiddenness problem of God uses someone's sincerity as the reason to debunk it. It wasn't until Mike said, well, that person isn't sincere, that's why God hasn't revealed themselves, that I'm saying, hey, I might take that a little personally because I am sincerely seeking.
So I reject the title Mindshift gave to that section. He accuses Mike of being dishonest. But otherwise, I think that was a fair response. He is definitely proving to be smarter than Zod.
Why would you stop believing him because someone else says that they seek the Lord and don't find him?
Why would I follow someone who says they sought the Lord and found him? If we're going to throw out personal experience, there goes your testimony for the Gospels. There goes your proof of Jesus' resurrection. There goes so much of what the Christian faith is built off of. You can't just throw out the individual experience when it suits you.
Missed it by that much.
Nice try, but that argument does not work. The Christian testimony is based off positive experience, while the atheist testimony is based off an argument from silence. These two are not the same. An argument from silence or lack of personal experience is a fallacy. An argument from personal experience is not.
The mental gymnastics here, the dishonesty, like, am I missing something?
Yes, you seem to be missing quite a bit. Hopefully this video finds you and you can catch up on some of it. In conclusion, yes, Mindshift is leagues better than the prophet of Zod. However, he still has a lot of work to do, most notably his habit of straw manning. If he can get his straw manning under control, maybe he could be the next Alex O'Connor, though I would prefer he just repents and accepts Jesus for real this time.